very visibly Arab guy. But I said, where did you develop your
success is that he's a cab
accent?
driver. That's his success. What would he have done without that English, huh?
No, but
Could have been a garbage man instead. He's a cab driver.
But this is the kicker. So he said, I spent 3 years in Chicago, and that's where I developed an American accent. But America is the land of, it's not a land for spiritual people. So I had to come back here. I had to come home. Like,
Wow.
what?
Wow.
And the best part is I asked him his name at the end of the ride. He said Osama.
Osama.
I said, I bet they didn't like that one so much in America. He was like, oh no, they used to mispronounce it all the time before 9/11, but now they know exactly how to pronounce it. I love that he had a sense of humor about it. It was so funny.
Oh, well. Okay, we are on page 57. The question, is that right? Yes. The question at the beginning of the Mimer was, it says, Usfartem lechem mimachros haShabbos. You should start counting Omer from the day after Shabbos. That was our question. Now, we spent a few days learning information that was necessary to appreciate the answer. But we now started the answer. Yesterday we started the answer, and what the beginning of the answer tell us, where we got up to, was that Sfiras HaEmer is sandwiched in between these two incredibly powerful revelations. One, the revelation of Atzmus Ein Sof at the time of Yetzias Mitzrayim, and the other, the incredibly powerful revelation of Atzmus Ein Sof at the time of Matan Torah. And sandwiched in between those two events is Sfiras HaEmer. And we are supposed to go from a place of tremendous distance from HaKadosh Baruch Hu to a place of tremendous closeness through that 49-day process. Right? And that, we're going to see, is dependent on the inyan of Mimachros HaShabbos. The koyach, meaning Mimachros HaShabbos, means in Pshat the day after Pesach. That's what it means. That's what Rashi says. Rashi in Chumash doesn't say Pesach. It's Mimachros Yom Tov, I believe. I don't think he says Mimachros Pesach. He says Mimachros Yom Tov. And it's this week's parsha. In this week's parsha. So you'll see it soon if we haven't seen it. We haven't seen it yet. We'll see it not today. When we'll Shishi Revi. So the time of counting is Mimachros HaPesach, which means we start counting the Emer on the 16th of Nisan after we bring the Korban. The Korban is brought in the day, and then we start counting, which means the first day we count in the day, and then we count at night. From then on, the 17th, on the 18th, on the 19th, and we count day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, until we're already up to day 21. Okay. So that's Sfiras HaEmer. Sfiras HaEmer comes after bringing the Korban, which we saw, and it's Mimachros HaShabbos. Now the question arose, of course, why is it said, why does the Chumash say Mimachros HaShabbos? Because that creates, first of all, that just objectively, that creates a certain amount of confusion. What does Mimachros HaShabbos mean, the day after Shabbos? And especially because the Tzdokim thought it meant literally Mimachros HaShabbos, which means that you would start counting Sfiras HaEmer after Shabbos Chol HaMoed. Meitzi Shabbos Chol HaMoed, you would start counting, which means this year they would have counted 1 when we counted 5, which means Shavuos would be 4 days later for them, because Shavuos doesn't have a date. Shavuos is after counting 49 days of Omer. So they started counting Meitzi Shabbos Chol HaMoed Pesach. It just says Mimachros HaShabbos, that's what it says, and they took it literally. And so therefore Shavuos fell out on a different day. Shavuos by them always fell out on Sunday. Shavuos was always Meitzi Shabbos Sunday, because he would always hit the 50th day, Meitzi Shabbos. Right? So that's how the Tzdokim kept count. It took a while to convince them that they were wrong. In the end, they accepted the fact that they were wrong. Okay. So then why does it say Mimachros HaShabbos? And that's what we got to. Page 57. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 lines down. Hine mishum zeh, in the 5th line. Hu omer mimachros HaShabbos, right? Beginning of the line. Hu omer mimachros HaShabbos. 6th line on page 57. Dihine. Rabbi's going to explain why it is that the Torah says what it says. Dihine. Yomim yutzru. Days were created. In other words, basically the Eibishter created 2 things, space and time. So space is rather easily defined. You can see it. Time, It's this rather ethereal thing. It passes. Don't know exactly, how it works. It's measured by the movements of bodies in space. That's how we measure time, but exactly what time is sort of hard to define. We just know it passes. And it somehow measures change, right? Time is about change, even though there's aspects of time that are all about repetition, right? The word shana actually has two different meanings, right? Mishnah means repetition, Mishnah Torah. So shana is something that just repeats on itself, but of course the same word also means shinui, change. So there's this interesting dichotomy in time, right? Because after all, it just keeps repeating. Basically, the Eibshter created 7 levels of time. Yom Rishon, Sheni, Shlishi, Revi, Chamishi, Shishi, and then a level of time called Shabbos. And then what happens next? Yom Rishon comes again. There's no 8th level of time. There will be a Immerse Mashiach, and that's going to be called Yom Shekula Shabbos. But up until now, there's 7 levels of time, one definitely more holy than the others, and they just repeat upon themselves. Yeah?
Is there a Jewish daya as to who came up with the idea? Because we know that Hashem came up with the idea of a 7-day week in Masa Bereshit, but is there a Jewish daya as to who came up with the idea of seconds and minutes and hours? Because who's to say that a day isn't something completely different from what we perceive it to be? Like, in regards to Masa Bereshit, there's definitely opinions that Hashem's day is different from our day. So it
says we hear every beggar in the Torah that a day is
right, but who said that's not that? Who said that's divided into 12-hour periods of 60 minutes, each of which is 60 seconds?
We don't do that.
Who said a day isn't?
We don't do that.
27 hours.
We
each divided into minutes of 53 seconds each.
First of
for
all,
whatever reason.
We don't divide a day into 24 hours of 60 minutes. We don't do that. We divide a day into 24 pieces. Each piece, depending. Day pieces and night pieces are divided by 12 from either dawn to seis, or that's the sheet of the Magen Avram, how we do it, or from sunrise to sunset. And that's what's called the sha'az maniyah. Right. And we know that we definitely talk about hours, and al pi halacha, you have to say Kriya Shema before 3 hours of the day. How do you define an hour? 3/12 of the day. 3/12 of daylight. Now, how do you define daylight? So there's machlokes how you define daylight, whether you define it from dawn to seis, or you define, which would mean it's much longer because it starts before sunrise and ends after sunset, or as a day, and this is the simple meaning, this is how the Gra and the Alter Rebbe explain it, from sunrise to sunset. Okay, but the idea of the fact that every day is divided up into 2 sets of 12, that's clear. That's brought in Kabbalah way back. And each hour has its own siruf of Yud Kei Vav Kei, because any 3-letter root has 6 different combinations: ABC, ACB, BCA, BAC, CBA, CAB, right? So any 4-letter root will have 24 combinations, 1 times 2 times 3 times 4. But a 4-letter root that has the same letter twice will have 12 permutations. Yud Kei Vav Kei. So Yud Kei Vav Kei has 12 different permutations. Each hour is shayach to a particular permutation. That's how the Alter Rebbe told time in his room in jail, even though there were no windows. Right? He knew what time it was based on the level of the godly energy that was vitalizing that hour. So there's 12 hours of day and 12 hours of night. So that we know. But we don't divide it up into 24 equal pieces. We divide it up into 24 unequal pieces, meaning 12 equal pieces and 12 equal pieces.
Ultimately, that's how we do it for halachic purposes, but really we use a combination of the two. Like we say that the Sha'az Mania for Shkia is at this time on.
Well, that's just because
clock.
That's what the that's what the world did. That's what you could, but that's what the world does.
It would be impractical for.
I agree. So the world figured out this way to tell time, and it's very useful. So we use it 100%. But that's not ultimately how we tell halachic time.
Right.
100%. We don't define shkia in terms of being 6 o'clock. Shkia is whatever shkia is, right? Now, where's that more important? Seisman Kriya Shema. It's really where it's important. Right? Seisman Kriya Shema. Seisman Tefillah is also Seisman Tefillah, right? Which is a third of the day of 4 hours. It's So yes, you and I will say that that's on such and such a date, so on such and such an hour, 10:22 a.m. Okay, that's very useful. The same way you'll say that ER falls out in May, which is also useful, but that's not ultimately how we tell Torah.
Yeah.
Right? It's just useful. Right? So we also divide the Torah up into chapters and verses, and we use the chapters that some monks made up. But it's useful. It just works. Why not? But that isn't how we tell time. Tell time based on metaphysical time, and metaphysical time is divided up into 12 equal pieces. And that's called, what we're going to see here, Zmanim and Seder Zmanim, the order of time. But the Eibusha created time. Interesting enough, the only measure of time that's not clearly visible in physical reality is a week. If some creature fell down from some other galaxy or whatever, and he, fell down here, so he'd figure out the idea of days relatively quickly. Like he'd figure out, there's this cycle. It gets dark and it gets light and it gets dark and it gets light. He'd figure that out. He hung around a little longer. He wasn't in England, so he'd figure out there's this lunar cycle also, because he'd have to obviously not have a cloudy sky in order to figure this out. So if he had a clear sky, he'd look up and he'd see the moon gets bigger and the moon gets smaller and the moon gets bigger and the moon gets smaller, and he would figure it out over time that it's a 29, 30-day cycle. It's 29 days and 12 hours. That would take him a while to figure out, but he'd figure it out that it's basically 30-day cycle. Right, okay. Which is evidently how the native Indians told time, because in all the movies they always said many moons ago. Okay, what does that mean? Many months. That's what they mean. Okay. Whether they actually said that, I'm not sure, but I assume they did. I'm sure they found some evidence to that fact. Years, well, if he lived anywhere but on the equator, he would probably figure out that there's this thing called a year, because it gets colder and it gets warmer and it gets colder and it gets warmer, and there's more dark and less dark and more dark and less dark. He'd figure that out. That would take a while. Right? The only thing he couldn't possibly figure out is a week, because a week and that's why it's going to be important here. A week is not physical time. A week is metaphysical time. A week is based on the fact that the Yeshiva created the days and the world in 7 days, and the first day happens again, and that you would not see in physical reality. Which is really nice that the whole world counts time that way, because the whole world is ultimately testifying to the fact that God created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh. Chinese people didn't do that until relatively recently, when they wanted to join the markets of the West and make lots of money. I think they had a 10-day week.
I think the French tried a 10-day week after the French Revolution for a little bit.
Yeah,
Failed miserably.
They're godless, right? But the idea of a week is based completely on the fact that there's godly time. So now in that time that is really the time that the Eibusha created. Yes, of course the Eibusha created months and years, but the time that the Eibusha created are these days, and there's something called Yom Rishon, there's something called Yom Sheni. Each of these days is very, very unique, and there's 7 levels of it, and then it reverts back to the first level. There isn't an 8th yet. Right? So that's what the Rebbe says here. Yomim Yutzru, Uklolis Ishtalshalus, and the basic reality of Seder Ishtalshalus, meaning the orderly downward emanation of godly light to create what you and I call worlds, and ultimately down here, also up there's something called nature. It's a different nature. Down here is physical nature. Sheklolis Ishtalshalus hu bezmanu makim. He's in space and is in time and space. Bagbola dafka in a state of limitation, so that you can measure space, you can measure time. Again, the interesting thing is we measure time by the virtue of the movement of bodies in space, but we measure time. We also measure time, and if I say to you, I'm going to be there in an hour, you know what I mean, right? Okay. Now, that's easier with a watch. In the old days, I wouldn't say I'm going to be there in an hour. I don't know exactly how I would tell you, but something to do with where the sun would be in the sky. I would probably say, I'm going to be there around midday. How much? Or around sunrise, or halfway between sunrise and midday. How precise could I get? Right? And cloudy days were a problem. Kids who went to school were always late on cloudy days, and the teacher couldn't punish them. He said, "Well, where are you?" I just couldn't tell what time it was, sir.
Sundial wasn't
Yeah,
working.
it just wasn't working, and I thought it was earlier. So what's he supposed to say? So he says, so the Abishah created time and space, and time and space are limited. Dihine, klolos ishtalshlos, basic downward emanation of light, meaning the natural order, worlds, etc., is ausgestellt, is revealed, geworden, ausgestellt, geworden, meaning it's revealed, bekedima ve'ichur, before and after. Now there's before and after in space, and there's before and after in time, right? Which is interesting. And the source of before and after in time is before. Generally, when we talk about before and after, we talk about it in spatial terms as opposed to temporal terms. Even though, when we're talking about Elokus, we will also say this happened before this. Now, neither of those is exact because obviously we're not talking about space. We're talking about a level beyond space. We're talking about a level beyond time. But we will say that this event happened before this event in the whole process of bringing about the creation of the world. And this level of light is higher than this level of light, which means it appeared before, so to speak. But it's also higher. Okay. We use those words because we don't have any other words to use. So this whole idea of kedima ve'ichur was brought into being, and mati velo mati, which is a really interesting idea in Chassidus. Mati means to touch, reach, magia. So touching and not touching, reaching and not reaching, existing and not existing, and that existence is all about the existence of something and then its lack thereof to allow for something else, so to speak, to exist. Right, and that's why we say Kadosh Baruch Hu Mechadesh B'Choyim Tamid Ma'aseh Bereishis. The Eibishter brings the world into creation constantly. Well, what does that mean? Right? Well, the idea with the mushal used to help understand that is the mushal of 35 millimeter film. Now you what's it called now? The video that they have, digital video is the same, right? But you can't see it. You can see it with 35 millimeter film. What do you see? If you're holding a reel of film, what do you see? You see an image, and then a space without image, and then a new image, and then a space without image, and then a new image. Well, what allows for the picture to be a motion picture as opposed to a static picture? The space in between. Right? So as that picture is going past this is low tech, right? As that film is going past the projector, the light which is projecting the image onto a screen, so it's a new image constantly. Now, it's, you've seen old film and it's very jumpy and sketchy, right? Whereas video is, the digital stuff is just seamless. But even 35 millimeter was basically seamless, so you would look and it wouldn't be jumpy. You would just see a constant stream of an image, but the image is changing constantly. What's allowing the image to change? The non-image in between each image. In other words, the ayin in between each state of yesh. And that's how the Eibishter creates the world, so to speak. Ayin yesh, ayin yesh, ayin yesh, ayin yesh. Now you and I are not aware of these macro moments of ayin, but they're not really macro moments because there's no time there either. But so to speak, the world is going in and out of existence at all times. Right? That's what allows for change. Right? So those comic books you used to get as a kid, and you go like that, and you watch the little stick picture, this little stick guy move, which were really fun. That was our high tech in those days before computers. We grew up without that.
I used to spend hours making pictures
Oh,
over
yeah.
50 pages of notebook.
Okay, yeah. So I couldn't draw a straight line with a ruler, so I never did it. But we had those pictures. And what's happening? So you're seeing a slightly different image every time, right? So that's reality. Seeing a slightly different image of reality every macrosecond, every macrosecond. So obviously we're not aware of the world going in and out of existence, but that's what it's doing. So when we say he's constantly renewing creation, what does that mean? At 6 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time, the world goes out of existence, then comes back into existence every day. This is the BBC. Excuse me one moment as the world goes out of existence. Good morning. Right? That's not how it works. Right? It's not how it works. It's every moment. There's this mati velo mati of reality, which is really astounding. The Rebbe once did, I think it was Yeshiva Gadol, which was Tafshin Lamed in 1970, I think. So there were a lot of people came into New York, and the Rebbe made a special for Brengen Sunday for people who would come in for the Shabbos and were going back, for the visitors who were going back that day. So that it happened in the day of the Farbrengen. Now people were all getting on flights to Europe, because it's all people from Europe, but mostly from Eretz Israel. People were getting on flights through Europe, and they were leaving at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. Those flights through Europe that land in the morning in Europe, and then you continue on to Eretz Israel, or somewhere else in Europe. So people were sitting in the Farbrengen. They were nervous. Everybody started to look at their watch, trying to figure out, are they going to make the plane? Is the Rebbe going to stop, and we're going to be able to get to Kennedy Airport? So at one point in the middle of the Sikha, the Rebbe said, I don't understand why everybody's so nervous about their plane. And then the Rebbe explained this whole idea of the Eibush being Mechadesh B'choyom Tamid Ma'aseh Bereishis. And therefore the Rebbe said, so the plane that you're going to step on doesn't even exist yet. How can you miss it? It's only going to come into existence as you're stepping on it. Right? And then, of course, it will go in and out of existence as you're flying 35,000 feet in the air, which the Rebbe didn't talk about because that's rather scary. But don't worry about it because you're going in and out of existence also. So, if the plane doesn't come back into existence, neither will you, and you won't notice. but that's the way reality works. And that's shayach to the idea of mati velo mati. Shuin in zmanim, because mati velo mati is what allows for differentiation. Gvul. Shuin in zmanim v'seder zmanim. Time and the order of time, the way time works. Order of time is also understood generally, just in the most general level, as metaphysical time. Right? Now, obviously metaphysical time is not measured by the movement of bodies in space, right? Okay, but there's such a thing called metaphysical time up there. Delochein, hine, bichdei, Usfartem lechem, in order that there should be an Usfartem lechem, which is what? Which is, as we saw earlier in this chapter, counting the days, but also illuminating your days. Usfartem miloshem sapirus, brilliance, even sapir, a sapphire. Hainu, biur seder ishtalshlus, that means the rectification of Seder Ishtalshlus, the rectification of the natural order, and that's what we learned about in the Mimer, that Sfir Soim is all about rectifying the Nefesh Bahamis. That's why the Korban Mincha was from barley, which is animal food. So everything the Rebbe taught us about Sfir Soimer, in order to understand what we're learning now. Hainu Biur Seder Ishtalshlus, Ad Lamata Mata Ba'emek Tachas, until the lowest level imaginable, Malchus Sheba Malchus. This biur can't come from a level of Seder Ishtalshlus, liyosi mugbal, in that it's limited. In other words, the saying that the mashal that's brought in Chassidus over and over, and it's from Chazal, Eina asir mater asatzmer, a prisoner can't free himself. And if I want to get into a new state of being, I can't get into that new state of being from the state of being I find myself in, because I'm limited, so I'm just going to be in a new state of limitation. I'm not going to transcend my limitation. I'm not going to illuminate my limitation. I'm just going to expand the horizons of my limitation. It's the same limitation. Right? That's the difference between spiritual growth and physical growth. Physical growth would be called something along the lines of sport. What's sport all about? It's very, very engaging, because you're seeing people go beyond what you see as a boundary. They haven't gone beyond boundaries. They've just set a new boundary. So when the guy pole vault, most people, in the old days, it doesn't happen anymore because everybody has it on their phone. But in the old days, so every appliance store would have a few televisions facing the street, and they'd be on. So, in Canada, it was always funny this time of year, because on the West Coast, so the hockey games started at 5 o'clock. They started at 8 o'clock Eastern time, but there weren't any teams on the West Coast. It was all on the East Coast. So they'd start at 5 o'clock. So people were going home from work. So there would always be people on their way home from work, standing around the appliance store, watching the first period of the hockey game together, right? Watching it, they'd be schmoozing and then, at a commercial or in between periods, they'd run to their bus, their train, their car, whatever, and drive home. So every now and then you would see a bunch of people gathered around, and you'd always wonder, what's going on as you walked by. So you'd take a peek at the screen to see what's going on. This was very common. Take a peek at the screen to see what was going on. And very often, often enough that I remember this, that everybody would remember it, there would be someone, a pole vaulter trying to break the world record or something, right? So there'd be 8 or 10 people, 15 people around. And you'd say, well, what's going on? Oh, this guy is about to try to pole vault. Now, those days, I think it was 15 feet, 16 feet. Now I think they're up to 20 feet. Better poles. But it's trying to break the record. Oh, so now most people, even if you couldn't care less about some guy jumping over a pole in his underwear, most people would find that engaging. I wonder if he can do it. He's going to try to do something that no one's ever done. That's interesting. So most people will stop and watch. They've never heard of the thing, pole vaulting. They've never heard of it. Doesn't matter. And they're probably going to want the guy to do it until they find out he's a Russian, right? But I mean, in those days, right? But you probably want him to do it. Why? Because why not? I mean, you have nothing. I mean, you don't even know who the guy is. You've never heard of the whole thing. You just, wow, someone's going to try to do something that no one else has ever done? That's cool. Yeah, and they'll watch. And they'll generally root for him. And if he doesn't, everyone will go, hey, what are you, Ray? You don't even know who this guy is. You know nothing about this. But I'm attracted to it. Because going beyond limitation is attractive, and that's why people seem to be attracted to sports, right? Because even though, so when you're watching some guy do something that you couldn't possibly imagine doing, you find that rather, wow, that's amazing. But what's the problem? And this is the big problem. It's just a new state of limitation. It's not going beyond limitation. It's just creating a new state of limitation. True transcendence of limitation can't happen in Gashmias. It can only happen in Ruchnias. Oh, so Seder Ishtalshalus can't go beyond itself, can't transcend itself, because it is what it is. So if I want to change and bring about a true change in my natural state, the state of my Nefesh Bahamis, that change can't come from my Nefesh Bahamis. It can't come from the level of reality that is my Nefesh Bahamis, because then all I'm doing, that doesn't mean I can't improve. I can make Tide detergent new and improved, but it's not transcendent of Tide detergent. It's still Tide detergent. So I can bring about, and to say it in a negative way, but I don't, just to make the point, I can bring about cosmetic change, but nothing absolute, nothing real. How do I bring about real change? I have to tap into a letter beyond a level beyond Seder Ishtalshalus. Right? That's why in physicality that'll never happen. That doesn't mean it's not engaging to watch someone do something that I can't do. To see the best do something is always, I remember when we were kids, so I never played soccer. I wasn't interested in soccer. It was like, okay. But Pele came to play a soccer game in Vancouver. Mm-hmm. Now, there were no soccer fans in Vancouver. There was a soccer team that got, 15,000 people to a game. The soccer stadium, it was in the football thing. It held 32,000 people, I think, something like that. So 15,000 people would go to see the team. When Pele came, the place was full. Why? It's the best. Everybody's drawn to, this guy's better than everybody else. I want to see what that looks like. And everybody went. I went as a kid. Went to see Pele. And it was interesting, he was definitely better than everybody else. And when he had the ball, no one could take the ball away from him. We were all watching, and it was almost funny, because he was also, this was a league of, third class players.
When he was also super old, though.
Yeah, he was old, still. He went to the league just to help the league.
Right? Promote soccer.
But he was just so much better than everybody else. And you didn't have to know anything about soccer to notice, this guy is just a whole different thing. Right? And they couldn't get the ball away from him. It was funny. He'd have the ball and he'd be running around, and they were running after him and falling down, and they couldn't get the ball away from him. Okay, fine. So that's, You don't have to know anything to appreciate that, but that's still gvul. It's an expansion of gvul, but it's still gvul. It's just very, very engaging and inviting, and that's why it's so popular. But there's something that's real. But that thing that's real can't come from Seder Yishtalshel, because Seder Yishtalshel itself is limited. Ella, HaKoyach al zeh, where does the koyach come? To bring about a real change in myself? Not now to put this in terms of avodah, not simply discipline. Now that doesn't mean that discipline isn't necessary. Discipline is absolutely necessary. I can't do anything without discipline. But what's discipline? Discipline is my nefesh habahamis disciplining itself. Discipline is conscious me making decisions that I'm going to act in a certain way because I realize that that's good for me and positive and true and right. And it might not even be good for me. It's good. It's just what should be. Okay. Fine. So that will bring about a change in my behavior. There's no doubt about it. But it's not going to bring about some sort of existential change in me. Why? Well, because it's just me disciplining myself. So the puppy now, instead of making on the rug, makes on the grass. Okay, he's still a puppy. Hasn't transcended puppyhood. He's just a well-behaved puppy. Okay, fine. So if I want to be a well-behaved puppy, I need a lot of discipline, and I have to discipline myself to act in a certain way, and that way will be within the context of what's written in Shulchan Aruch. I get that, okay. But that's not real change. That's positive and incredible and great. Good, do that. If that's all a person can do, at least they're doing that, and that's great. But there's something so far beyond that. And what's Sfiras HaEmes? Sfiras HaEmes is preparing myself to get the Torah. I want to bring about a real change in my Nefesh HaBahamis. I want to bring about an existential change in my Nefesh HaBahamis. Where's that coming from? The Rebbe says an amazing thing. It's from a place beyond Shabbos. Why? It's from the day after Shabbos, so to speak. Why? Dehine Shabbos. What is Shabbos? It's the highest level in time. Right? The Mikaydim before Shabbos, 6 days of Chol. Shabbos. And then Shabbos, which is holier than all other time. Transcendent of all other time. But, aval, mikol mokem. Nevertheless, Shabbos mikdash v'kaima. Shabbos is made holy and existent. In other words, Shabbos has its own limited teva. And what do we know? How do we know that? Shugam keninin bisman. How do we know Shabbos is part of time? It ends. Shabbos ends. It's not that when you hit Shabbos, then Shabbos is such a transcendent level of reality that it's beyond limitation and therefore it doesn't end. No, it's simply the holiest place in that limited reality called time. It is definitely holier and transcendent of other time, but it's still time. Sheishis yomim also, b'yom hashvi, Shabbos v'nofesh. Right? So there's 6 days and there's 7th day. And what happens after the 7th day? Day 1. What will happen at some point? Yom Shekula Shabbos, 100%. There'll be a revelation of the level of Shabbos that's beyond limitation. It won't end. Taka, 100%. That's Mashiach. And that is usually called, so to speak, the 8th day. Right? The 8th level. Okay, but there's 7 levels of time, and the 7th level of time, as holy as it is, ends and reverts back to the 1st level of time. And since it's a reality in time, even though it's a time of kedusha, it's a time of holiness. It has enough, like it's sufficient to uproot itself. In other words, to allow itself to be different and transcendent of the rest of time. But it doesn't affect all the rest of time. All the rest of time is still what it is and isn't changed by it. It receives certain bracha from Shabbos, that's true. It receives a certain level of energy from Shabbos, that's true. But Shabbos isn't powerful enough to make Yom Rishon Shabbos. Yom Rishon still Yom Rishon. And when Shabbos ends, Shabbos is over and it's Yom Rishon again. Aval ein b'keichei, Shabbos doesn't have the power to completely transform the shtus of the other side. In other words, to transform mundane reality. It takes you to a place that is somewhat beyond mundane reality, But it doesn't change mundane reality because after all, what happens right afterwards? More mundane reality. It's really just quite amazing. So therefore, what's the level necessary to reach in order to bring about long-lasting change and existential change in your natural order? Machras Shabbos, a level the day after, beyond Shabbos. Machras Shabbos isn't simply a place in time. Machras Shabbos is a place in Elokus, a completely transcendent level of reality that brings about real change. Because if I can tap into that place, so then the limitations that I usually experience don't exist there. And so I can bring about real change in myself. And that's why Aveda isn't simply, Aveda, without discipline, nothing works in Aveda. That's true. If I don't get up, go to where I'm supposed to go and do what I'm supposed to do, nothing will happen. Okay, but now that I'm doing that, I also have to allow that to be a vehicle for the revelation of something beyond that limited space. And what's that basically? Well, allow my Nefesh Elokis to penetrate and illuminate my Nefesh Bahamis. So my Nefesh Elokis isn't bound by those limitations. If it's all my Nefesh Bahamis, then it's all just discipline. Discipline's important, and without discipline, nothing's going to happen. And otherwise, if it's just discipline, okay, at least I'm acting like a mensch. I'm not destroying the world. Baruch Hashem, doing mitzvahs, keeping Shabbos, eating kosher, doing all sorts of good stuff. Amazing, incredible. Okay, but we saw this in Lysim Shekelu. What does God want? He wants us to change, right? He doesn't just want us to change our action. He wants us to bring about change in ourselves, right? Because it might be I'm naturally inclined just to do the right thing. Okay, so how do I bring about that change? I tap into my Nefesh Elokis. Tap into that part of me that's transcendent. What's that? That's Machras Shabbos. Let's just see one or two more lines and then we'll stop. Omer al zeh, sorry. Lochem, the lochem. In order to change reality, transform reality, not just tame reality, the lochem hine kishu omer usfartem lachem says, illuminate your nefesh bahamis. To truly rectify down to the lowest levels of reality. Says Mimachras Shabbos. Dafka. It's dafka from a place beyond Shabbos, because Shabbos is the highest place in the limitation of time, but I have to get beyond those limitations in order to bring about real change. It's beyond the natural state of Kedusha that Shabbos is. Is completely beyond the natural order. And that's what allows us to bring about the true birur. And we'll see. Now we have to make a decision about Wednesdays. We had a fairly easy decision about Wednesdays because half the class can't come on Wednesdays, Dr. November, but now maybe he's a third of the class. The idea was to make Wednesday a review day because Dr. November generally doesn't come on Wednesdays because he works late Tuesday night. I think that's the only day he works in a clinic, but I think Tuesdays he works in a clinic and he works very late and he finds it hard to get here Wednesday morning. So in deference to him, we decided maybe we'll make Wednesday a review day.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah? So we'll show up and review. So we'll make, tomorrow will be a review day. We'll go right to on Thursday. You can catch up anyway. You have some catching up to do. Now he might not go, he doesn't feel well today, so I hope he'll go to work tonight. Not because I want him to miss tomorrow. I want him to feel better, so he'll go to work tonight. So, but tomorrow, generally Wednesday will be a review day. So tomorrow will be a review day. Okay? And we'll pick up on Thursday and we'll finish we have one more thing to do. Maybe I should start wearing white suits, huh? We have one more
Just
thing.
take off the jacket during the day.
One more thing to do is Lag Baimer. Right, that's the next thing. Zer Shaykh is to Lag Baimer. Because this is a Lag Baimer Maimon, right? So we'll figure that out before Lag Baimer. Okay. Well done.